Check, check. Can hear you, Shuling.
Uh, yeah, now it looks fine. I could hear Sugumar saying hi.
Yes.
Okay, great. Looks like we're all set. And yeah, welcome to all the participants. In fact, all the startups, and there are some folks from outside the vicinity also. But a very warm welcome to all of you. And since we are at 3 minutes past 3, I would request all to put on your video and just give a brief introduction about yourself. So that will set the tone. Post which definitely I'll ask Sugumar also to take it over from there. So yeah, maybe Shiva, you can start introduction. Then we have Abhishek, Krishna, everybody. Go ahead.
Shooting. And hello, Sukumarji. My name is Shiva. I am co-founder and CEO of Telcosol. We are a G20 recognized NASCOM incubated startup company. We are done and through with our first contract for British Telecom in B2B, B2B2C mode for transformation project of their network operations center from conventional systems to cloud-based systems. They have their customers not only those who use the SIM cards and DSL connect just like you and me, but also enterprise customers who would be availing their 5G services and hosting services from British Telecom. So that was a fantastic project that would probably be helping me to ask very focused and relevant questions to you whenever you give us an overview about the cloud transformation journey here. Apart from that, we have also pitched for Vodafone Germany recently, and we have also been receiving several POC requests from Indian Telecom Industries Limited here in central government from Bangalore, Osmat office area. And yeah, so this is in a nutshell. We also did one unconventional, as in non-telecom related industry-specific POC, that is for Continental Group, which is a German-based 187-year-old company. They have a subsidiary here in Bangalore called H.A.C.K. So they make use of IoT devices, sensors, and connected devices for their autonomous driving platform, which is driven through software. AutoSAR is the software. So there also we did a fantastic POC. We executed the POC. So that's in a nutshell, because I do not want to. I can keep talking on and on, but I do not want to consume entire time. So I leave the opportunity.
Wonderful having you, Shiva. Thank you for the
Thank you.
introduction.
Thanks, Shiva.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Abhishek. Maybe if you could introduce.
Hello.
Thanks for the introduction, Shiva. Yeah, good.
Hello, H.A.C.K. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Abhishek.
My name is Abhishek, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at Secured App. We are primarily a blockchain security company. What we have done is we have built a product which is called Solidity Shield. Solidity Shield is an AI-powered vulnerability detection application. This particular product can detect more than 100 vulnerabilities in smart contract, which is deployed or not deployed, in less than 30 seconds. So this is completely automated and product. While we reduced say about 2 weeks of time, which was going in a manual audit process, in less than 30 seconds. That is where what we have achieved through product. And obviously, I don't think it's a right platform, but the cost of audit, which is a close to 7,000-8,000 USD average cost, we have been able to bring it down to $300. And we have our scientific reasons. So this is what we have achieved through product. We are happy to be a part of today's session. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Pleasure having you, Abhishek.
Hi, Krishna. Hi, Krishna. Yes. Krishna, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
So
Namaste, one and all. I'm Krishna Gupta. I am running an information security company, VAPD Private Limited, where we secure cyber risk by simulating like that of a adversary. What we do is we perform vulnerability assessment and penetration testing for over 100 plus emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, and all the traditional ones as well, like web applications, servers, networks, and on the cloud. We have some clients from US, UK, Singapore, and as well as from Indian startups. And we are also solving the cybersecurity skill shortage, the great resignation, and the moonlighting on our newly launched beta platform, which is Ft.Sugumar, where we are consolidating both the IT experts and as well as the information security experts to find a security gap and as well as fix a security gap. Thank you.
thank you. Thank
Good
you so
having
much.
you, Krishna.
Hi, Dr. Reshma. Am I audible? Yeah. So, Dr. Ishma, I would request you to unmute and briefly introduce yourself. Okay. Meanwhile, I also request Vishwanath to unmute and give a brief introduction to just get introduced. So basically, this time I always utilize the first 5 to 10 minutes. We would utilize this for the introduction, because what lies out is most importantly is networking, right? At least in a business perspective, for every businessman, woman here, unless you network, they say that your network is a net worth. So utilize this 10 minutes, a quick introduction. Definitely, maybe next time when you go to Dell, or you just say hi to Sugumar, and yeah, he says, yeah, you remember. So
Yep.
that will help you definitely.
Likewise,
Okay.
the other side as well. So when I go, probably
Yes,
meet
yes.
them as well.
Great. Yeah. So hi, Manish. I hope I'm audible. I would request you to unmute yourself, Manish, and give a quick intro about your company, Clear Trust.
Good afternoon. Shivling, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are very much audible.
Yeah. So, hello guys. So I'm Manish. I'm from Clear Trust. So basically, we are into ad fraud and invalid traffic mitigation. So, telling you about ad fraud, you must be knowing that on our digital advertising ecosystem, there are many advertisers who publish their ads on websites. Now, to publish all those ads, the advertiser needs to pay the money to the publisher. So we are here to make sure that the advertisers are paying the publishers only when these ads are seen by humans and not by bots. So we catch the invalid traffic part.
Got it. Got it. Great. So thanks, Manish. I think these 4 5 startups of few of our very active startups, and not just active. I think I see them in the way the scale they are growing. Sugumar is quite impressive, because even in the previous cohorts, we have seen some startups uh, uh, struggle a bit more. But this current cohort 3, has been a very good one, and seen very good startups, very potential startups, who have also, I mean, not just technically adapt, but also they know the skill of acing through the market, capturing everything. Because for that, I am seeing a security app increasing their workforce almost by the double number. Correct. Every once in a week, I see they're welcoming new people to the team, and for that, Manish is traveling to different countries, the Clear Trust for that matter. And I see Shiva have been participating in so many different events and forums. So all that. Having said that, without waiting for any more time for other startups to join in, I would welcome this Sugumar. Just to give a brief about Sugumar Umapathy. So he is currently serving as enterprise architect and field CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Dell Technologies, and he's focused on solving business challenges and enabling customers in the digital transformation journey. His primary areas of expertise include digital transformation, enterprise architect, IT modernization, business continuity, and multi-cloud strategies. And prior to this, he was an SME, subject matter expert, architecting storage and BCP, business continuity plan, on a critical missions. Well, with that, I think I can speak as much as I can about Sugumar, because his extensive years of experience, 20 plus of years of experience in the industry, is quite impressive. But I would do the less of talking today and do more of hearing today, because when we have the experts in the house, better I pass on the mic to them and sit back and catch whatever I can. So over to you, Sukumar. Thanks for accepting our request, and just at one request, you quite impressed that you made out your time on a busy weekend here to share your experience for the benefit of our startups. Over the next couple of, let's say, 50 odd minutes, I would request startups to stay tuned in, make notes, and try to keep your questions to the last, because unaffecting the flow of Sugumar. And yeah, by 4:15 we try to wrap up the session. And for your information, the session will be recorded just for the related reference purpose. Thank you. Over to you, Sugumar.
Thank you, Shivaling, for that kind introduction. I'm really glad and happy to be part of this conversation here, and glad to meet a lot of these evolving and growing startups. And what more can we expect when we have all the able capabilities that you're bringing aboard and solving challenges for customers? Without these startups, it is impossible to make the human progress. So Dell, one of the primary objectives or the vision for the company is to drive human progress with technology. And these tech startups that we have here are the ones which eventually will grow up to solve larger and larger challenges. That way, I'm really glad I'm part of this conversation, and thank you for having me. Um, in terms of my primary areas of work, I do help a lot of enterprises, and I also work with a large amount of startups. Some of the common things that I come across when I speak to startups, especially, is most of them are born in the cloud. They are native in the cloud. Cloud, when I say here, I will get into the presentation and talk about a few things. But before I even get started, a couple of things. I would like this to be an interactive session. Let this not be a one-way communication. If you have any questions, anything that comes to your mind, feel free to stop me then and there and in your thoughts, and we can possibly have a more collaborative engagement here. And in terms of cloud, when we say is anything that is available as a service. So public cloud is one way of consuming it. The most popular names: AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle, IBM. There are many, many. The top three obviously are the AWS, GCP, and Azure. So I'm assuming all of you, in some way or the other, are in these top three cloud vendors, or are you all having your deployments elsewhere as well? Maybe that could be a good conversation to start with before we get into the strategy that we can think about.
Yeah, hi. If you can pitch in here, Sugumar.
Yeah, please.
The very first experience which I had with British Telecom, which I mentioned, the reason why BT started, transforming their conventional network operations center to cloud-based network operations center is because of the extensive penetration of AWS, GCP, and probably your cloud solutions as well. They wanted to avoid the monopolies of very selected handpicked cloud service providers and wanted to build their own cloud platform. Nonetheless, I mean, they would have realized it 10 years back, but nonetheless, they have realized it now, and the extent of OPEX margins that it is going to safeguard if they have their own cloud environment. That is one approach. And apart from that, other telecom operators with whom we have pitched in, they have definitely depended on mix and match of hybrid cloud, which is not focused only on one particular cloud vendor, but also their own private with an on and off different multiple cloud vendors, like it could be GCP or AWS. But in case of
Thank you.
Specific experience for us, they have tried to build their own cloud platform to avoid the license costs. Yeah, over to you. Sorry.
No, thank you. And definitely, so this is a trend that we are seeing. Quite a lot of customers. Maybe if I take a step back, right, about 5-7 years back, cloud first was a strategy most organizations started off. Whatever is running on premises, lift and shift into the public cloud. And now they have gone a little bit more educated and conscious decision to look at application first approach or a data first approach, depending upon which workload should run where, is where a lot of organizations are moving towards. So my question to this team here: where do you develop your products? Not your customers. I'm asking about your products. Are you developing and operating your, maybe you're offering SaaS, maybe you're offering as a subscription, maybe you're offering your IP as something that your customers can consume. Where is the development and the um, production happening for these? Are they on the public cloud? Anybody else? Maybe Abhishek, where are you hosting your workloads on?
So GitHub is what we use
Okay.
to, and it is 95% of our product is open source. Only when it comes to our AI product, which reduces the time and the effort. That is what we have kept it this. It is on GitHub, and as a cloud, digital ocean is what we had used so far.
Okay.
At this level, when we are just scaling and we are very not that big as a company, and as a solution, just a minute, some aeroplane is passing by. Okay, and as a solution, we are adopting a SaaS based approach.
Okay, wonderful.
So,
So, yeah,
yeah.
Manish, yes, please go on.
Yes, I am not a techie. I mean, I had the marketing, but still, I know about the cloud ones. We use AWS and Herzner.
Okay.
And that's it.
Sure. Thank you. So, in terms of the probable choices that are available in the industry today, there are enormous, actually. Frankly speaking, these three, as I mentioned, AWS, GCP, and Azure are most commonly used, but there are a lot more available today in the market who offer a similar service model at possibly a more affordable uh, price points as well. DigitalOcean, there are Alibaba Cloud. There are a lot of people who have used even the remote services that are offered by many cloud service providers. So the objective of this conversation today is to look at where you are today and depending upon your growth plans, how can you adopt technologies without that becoming a burden to you? So today, the primary reason why startups like you choose a public cloud or a public service provider, uh, be it the top three or anybody else, is simply because you have that flexibility to consume what you need for the period of time that you need and then come out of it without really having to get locked in. That is something which is the biggest advantage, which is a which is a way to avoid the prohibitive costs of having equipment on your own because you really don't know what is your growth rate and where are you going to end up, and having to invest in large amounts of technology on an capex purchase and building a data center and running that is financially not a viable solution and may not be even the right way to move forward. So what we encourage customers, a lot of startups is one of the primary areas that we work with as well. So for startups, when we work with them, we know almost 100% of them are born in the cloud, as I mentioned before as well. They have consumed some service from somewhere, maybe a virtual machine, maybe a container platform, maybe a SaaS platform, and built their IP around it. And that's the best way to kickstart. Once you become maybe a sizable setup where the infrastructure becomes the control on the infrastructure becomes critical is when you need to think about what strategies to follow to optimize, to give better control, give better security and stuff like that. So as we speak, let me bring up my slides. I hope you're able to see my screen in a slide share mode. Shivaling, if you can just say, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. So in
Yes, we
terms
can.
of, thank you so much. So in terms of the cloud, right? So what do we really mean by cloud? Cloud is actually not a destination. It is not a place. Many people think when we say cloud, it is equal to maybe an AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, or Alibaba, or anything like that, right? It is not necessarily a place or a destination. It is more of an operating model. Anything that you can consume as a service, with a basically a experience of paying only for what you're using, and you're once you stop using it, you are not being asked to pay for it, right? The complexity of the infrastructure, IT, and everything you are taking away from that, from the end users, and you need to be able to adopt, scale up and down. Whether you need more, you should be able to consume more resources. If you don't need, you should be able to give away those resources and you shouldn't be charged. And anything to do with the latest technology and the tools that are available, right? Cloud is more of these 5 key attributes. It could be deployed anywhere at the private cloud. It could be at the edge. It could be even at a public cloud, which is what most of you would have looked at. Now, when we look at these 5 key attributes of a cloud operating model, and the place where you deploy is immaterial. So this is something what we encourage customers to look for when they start building their cloud strategies. So for you startups which are currently in the phase of adopting these clouds and making your business profitable for your long run, I think this is some things that you need to keep in mind for the long run, for the future, because today it may not be, you may not be at a point of taking a decision and deciding what you need to do next, but eventually you will get there. That's all about how the startups, uh, the way you uh, become, scale and grow is extremely fast. And when you get to that point of becoming a unicorn, for example, you do not want the baggage to be with you. You want to be able to make the right decisions much ahead of time. That way, you are not locked in to a particular uh, cloud or a particular technology at that point of time. Um, we all know this. This is again a little bit of basics for people who maybe are evaluating cloud. Uh, there are a lot of benefits of using cloud computing, right? First, you don't really own any of the assets. You are consuming it just like anything else, like an utility bill or maybe a Uber or a taxi service, right? You're not owning the vehicle, you're not owning the driver. All you need is you want to get from point A to point B, and that vehicle, the car is just a mechanism through which you go through. Cloud computing is pretty much the same. You are able to get things done and you come out of it once the work is done. So that flexibility is the biggest, I would say, attractive feature of a cloud computing. Extremely agile. It gives you the speed that you are looking at. Maybe you just need to use that services for few days, maybe 2 3 days, and you want to come out of it. You only pay for that 2 3 days. So there is no commitment, there is no lock-in, there is really no need for you to do a heavy investment upfront. And similarly, you are also able to deploy or offer your IP and your services wherever your clients may be. You don't have to bring them to your office in a data center that is sitting within your campus. You could possibly deploy a service for a customer in, say, Shiva was talking about British Telecom. So as long as it is accessible from in terms of distance and latency, British Telecom could be doing it in UK, and you could be sitting here, and you're still able to deliver your skill sets and capabilities to them. So going global becomes a lot more easier. And more importantly, you don't really need to have that upfront the expenses which typically are associated with having a IT infrastructure for running your workloads. What are typically a very good use cases for these public clouds? Almost anything could be run on a public cloud. Um, and this is something which we keep hearing from a lot of customers who have matured, enterprises who have not gone on cloud. They were on IT in their data center and they moved to cloud. A few things that they came back with were any application that is sensitive from an security, from an financial, and from anything to do with your own IP, right? That you do not want to be compromised in any form. Uh, Not necessarily a very good place to run it on a public cloud. Anything that is performance sensitive, where you want to be able to control the performance aspects of that application, because as you all know, the resources available on a public cloud are generally in a fixed configurations. So there are maybe a few templates of 100, but you will make do with what those 100 are. If you want a different configuration beyond those 100, you possibly are not going to get it. So again, that is a corner case in certain scenarios. But if your workload is in such a fashion that it needs, for example, today a lot of conversations happen around AI and generative AI. So when you want to do an AI based or a generative AI based workloads, many a times you might need resources like GPUs. Maybe you want to move away from GPUs, maybe you want to do FPGAs. Maybe there are a lot more accelerators today, or maybe quantum is another field that is evolving these days. These are some of these use cases where you don't get these readily available in a public cloud, and you might want to look at uh, having them um, on a dedicated setup. Similarly, when you have scale up kind of an architecture, which today is going away, more and more workloads are becoming more scale out, distributed architectures, distributed system architectures. That way, if you are looking at anything that is monolithic kind of a workload, then again, these are some things that are not as good on a public cloud. Rest of the workloads that you are looking at, almost everything runs fairly good. And today, for your workloads that you are doing, I'm 100% sure all of that is working fairly simple in your current adoption of a cloud. Are there any challenges that any of you want to bring up now for maybe looking at how to uh, to how to move forward without really disrupting a lot of what you're doing? Are there any challenges that any of you would like to bring about?
Sumar, hi. If
Hey, Shiva,
there's
hi.
questions, yeah, because based on my very first contact itself, I'm having a couple of questions. In the BT project, when they wanted to transform into the cloud-based network operation center, there were series of open source software which were either Kubernetes hosted or cloud hosted, the entities, I would say. Uh, but the challenges that we were facing at the time of practically realizing the architecture what we had proposed is in terms of sustaining or managing the volume of data. You mentioned it right regarding the scaling, but how do we arrive at a point wherein how many instances of ELK, or it could be Kafka or Nagios kind of systems which we can host on the cloud platform, or create images or replicas of those systems on the cloud platform. One of the biggest challenge that we encountered. To put it in a nutshell, in theoretical aspects or in lab environment, the sandbox environment, we were able to pretty much establish the entire stack suite on the cloud platform. But the moment we brought it onto the practical, as in the production environment, wherein there will be a gush of volume, gush of volume, data volumetric of the data, that is when it fails. So is there any algorithm or criteria wherein we understand, on what range these systems can multiply themselves, the image could be multiplied, and how do we sustain such an approach? I hope my question was clear.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a typical uh, concern. A lot of workloads which are when you open it for public, right? So in the traditional method, if you really look at the end users are pretty limited, or we know how many are there, right? But when it comes to uh, today's world where your end user is anybody in the world, so you are basically opening it up for any sort of a scale. And that's actually the good part about cloud is this is practically the best place to run, because you really don't know how much to procure upfront and keep. That way, public clouds are real saviors here. But yes, like you mentioned, the sizing is very, very critical. So I'll give you an example of one of the large UPI in India, UPI service provider in India. I'll not take the name, but they handle volumes of transaction upwards of about 30 million transactions every single day, right? So if you really look at how they went about it, they did not look at a public cloud. They are on premises for this use case. But how did they arrive at is they simply started off building the foundation that can be scaled very easily, right? When I say scaled very easily, it is not something that they could buy off the shelf and start consuming it, because none of the readily available packages of tools was is going to be able to solve their business challenge. So what they did was they started off with a team which started putting together these components and started building the scale out nature of this workload and built it in a more like a pod kind of a structure. So what they did was they had certain number of, so obviously, as you know, the UPI transactions happen at different points of the day are very, very different, right? So during 6 in the evening till about 10 in the evening night, there is a lot of transactions that happen. After 10, 11 till about 6, 7 in the morning, not many happen. Then again, shoots up between 7 to 10 and then averages out during the day, and then evening is typically a peak, right? So they understood the pattern of the workload and started to build the infrastructure that is necessary to support this kind of a scaling. Now, if you ask me, did they go about and get it right in the first place? The answer is no, right? They did fail initially. They did have a lot of learnings that came in, but the most important aspect of it was they learned from it and started to deploy it in such a way that during a particular period of time, so they did not do uh, a very fluid architecture in the beginning. Eventually, what they arrived at is they started going addressing each component within the stack. Where is the bottleneck, right? And how do you scale? Because many a times what happens is you are able to scale one aspect of your stack, some other aspect goes bad, and that becomes a bottleneck. So they needed to build the scaling right from the every layer of that stack. So they did trial and error a few times and eventually got to a stage where now you would typically not have any such challenges. Today, UPI transactions, as I mentioned, are going extremely ballistic in terms of the number of transactions that happen, and you would possibly have never felt there is a challenge. And if you really look at it, it's extremely low margin. I would say zero margin, because you really don't pay for any UPI transaction, right? So where do they get the money from, right? Despite those commercial, there are no incentives for them to deliver this. They do get data and they do use that to uh, make revenue out of it. But end of the day, the infrastructure that they deploy to handle this uh, massive scale. This is possibly the largest transactional uh, workload that you would expect to run, and this is something which happens across multiple data centers. Depending upon where you are from, you are typically associated with a particular data center, a particular server, and a particular virtual machine. To that extent, your instance of that application is locked. So they have gone to that level of fine tuning. So the short answer, of course, I went for a very long answer for this. The short answer for you, for your question, is the because you possibly are going to be the first ones to do this, and there aren't anybody who has done it in the past. You would not most likely get a reference or a template for you to feed in. It is going to be a little bit of hardship getting things done on your own. There are technology capabilities that we have. There are labs and there are test environments that are available where we could deploy and extrapolate to an extent. But will that be 100% accurate? The answer is no. You will have to go through a bit of a struggle initial phase of your setup, because you are the first ones. So you are actually the ones who are torchbearers here. So it is unfortunate that you have to go through that, but it is also a great learning experience, and you would have solved it for so many others to come in. I hope that answers, Shiva.
Yes, it does, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any thoughts before we go to the next one? All right. So in the interest of time, let's move on. So let's take an example of what typically happens in a cloud adoption, right? Many a times, again, this is AWS because that's the most sought after public cloud today. Uh, this is applicable equally for any other public cloud, right? Many a times what organizations do, including startups and even large organizations, including me as an individual, right? When I want to try cloud, or when I want to look at how I can do my testing and everything, I would have ended up starting consuming maybe one EC2 instance, which is basically a virtual machine, maybe some storage attached to it, an S3 bucket. And that's where I would have started off, possibly one or two other services. Uh, Eventually, what really happens is, based on the growth that you have and the number of services that you would consume, it really becomes, everything becomes connected between each other. How many of you know the number of services that AWS offers today? Wild guess, how many services they offer?
No idea.
No idea. Okay, so roughly about 200 services they offer. Okay, so EC2, in terms of where they make their money, right? EC2 still, even today, right? AWS started in 2009 or 10. 23 when we are talking about, right? Even today, EC2 is their biggest churner, right? It contributes to more than 50% of their revenue. That's a virtual machine, right? The S3, which is basically an object storage, and EBS, which is an elastic block storage, which is something that you attach to the EC2 to host your database or anything like that. S3, EBS, and RDS, which is your relational data store database as a service, right? RDS. These three plus EC2, these four services put together contributes to 70% of AWS revenue. That is the maximum being looked at by the customers, right? The rest of the 200 services, rest of the 200 I can say, because out of the 200, only 4 of them contribute 70% of their revenue. The rest of them are there, but actually what are they used as are more for delivering new functionalities for uh, end users, but they are more like a lock-in for you, right? If you are, for example, deploying a virtual machine, let's take an example. You want to run a Ubuntu virtual machine on an EC2, and you have consumed, say, 500 GB space on an EBS, and maybe a terabyte on S3, and you are running fine for, say, a year. Your bills are very predictable. You are okay with the expense that's going through, and you are having pretty good control of it. And at the end of a year, you realize AWS is increasing the prices, or your outflow is becoming higher. You want to come out of AWS and maybe choose GCP, because GCP is offering maybe at a cheaper price, right? You will still be able to do that very, very easily, because you really haven't locked your services or your IP to the AWS services. The same situation, if you started off with the TC2 EBS plus S3, and you started consuming, say, Aurora, which is the data RDS, relational database as a service, or you have considered Athena, or you have considered EKS, or you have considered um, so many other services that are available, right? So you have started tying in all of those services into your application stack and your workflow. Now, for you to make this decision at the end of the year that my bill is not what I thought initially would be. I wanted to go to GCP for whatever reasons, but I have sort of locked in. For me to move out of AWS to GCP, I need to put in a lot of efforts to redo my application. Maybe I'll need to do another level of testing. There is a lot of effort as an organization that needs to put in to make this functional seamlessly in another public cloud, right? So this is the stage two, which we see a lot of customers are now wanting to avoid. They are adopting a public cloud is today inevitable, I would say. You need to leverage that public cloud for a lot of reasons. The smart way to adopt is you adopt it without being really attached to it. And this is not just for AWS. This is the same for Azure. This is the same for GCP. This is the same for anybody else. As long as the workload that you're running is in your 100% control, which means you control the OS onwards, everything else, right? That is the best way to handle a complexity that typically happens over a period of time. You're not being bottled or locked in by that particular public cloud vendor when it comes to the future of your organization in itself, right? And this is also something that we hear a lot from our customers who has when you grow larger is where this complexity comes in, right? Today you're possibly a lean team, maybe a few people who are very well connected, very well coordinated, and you know what each one of you are doing. The larger the organization becomes, the silos start to happen, and major amounts of shadow IT happens because the control of what you deploy in AWS is with you. You might choose, okay, this seems to be a fancy new idea, and I can do that in a few minutes in this particular as a service model of AWS. Let me start consuming it without really realizing the impact of it in the long run for your organization. You've gotten into something that is a lock-in. I'll give you an example of one of our customers who really had to pay $23 million to take out data from a public cloud, his own data, right? You all know that there is a egress cost when it comes to taking your data out. Data into the cloud is free, but data out of cloud is always costed, right? So when it comes to having the data which they have been storing for a very long time, one of the examples like what Shiva was highlighting is massive amounts of data comes in. People build data lakes on public clouds, and after 3 years, you realize, oh, it's becoming massively expensive to run on, say, Azure, as an example here, right? And then you think, okay, I should ideally move to maybe a GCP or somebody else who's offering at a half the price. I really can't move because the lock-in, the cost of moving the data is so massive that it might even cost your company, right? So that's something that this particular startup, which ended up having to delete nearly 5 years worth of data because it was unreasonably expensive for them to pay so much and get that data. So they had to discard that data. So discarding data is free. Yeah, bringing it out of a public cloud is not free, and it is massively expensive. And it all depends on how interlinked all your services are and whatnot, right? So in essence, what I'm trying to say is look at your workloads, how you're deploying on the public cloud. Keep the complete control of your workload, application, and your data with you all the time. You consume services of the public cloud to the best possible way without really getting locked in to those services that are being offered. That's my uh, key message from this particular slide. Right? Let's take an example, right? So when I start with deploying a workload on a public cloud, I look at, okay, EBS and say an EC2 instance, right? Roughly This is what it works out to, about $10,000 a month, right? So it's a 100 virtual machine kind of a configuration. Now, is this all that I will end up consuming? What really happens is you would start needing many of these services that are there. And because it is fairly simple to adopt and simple to add on, you would start adding all of these to that workload. And this is one of the key reasons why the cost of cloud is generally not very transparent, which customers come back to us saying they thought the bill would be, say, $10,000 a month. But eventually, this is a lot more than that, 2x, 3x over a period of time. And when they realize that it is gone unaffordably expensive, is when they realize that they have really got everything locked in. For them to come out, it will take another 6 months to even build a parallel portfolio in another public cloud provider and then start discarding this. So it becomes extremely painful for those customers. You pay through a lot of money that you have to go through, but at the same time, the expertise that you have built and the services that you have been delivering, so becomes quite challenging to sustain. And this is something what we hear from almost every customer that we speak to. This is the biggest concern they come back with. One, the cloud costs are spiraling. In fact, to an extent, 2023 has been dubbed as the year of repatriation. Almost every organization has now been thinking of moving the workload out of a public cloud. Not everything. Many, so they have, as I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, people blindly went into this cloud first strategy. Today, people are talking about data first strategy, a workload based conversation where they want to look at a particular workload, whether it is best to run this workload on a particular public cloud or should it be run on a different place, because you do a cost benefit analysis, you do look at the lock-in and the future of that particular workload and decide where is the really the right place to run this particular workload without really having to be locked in and be able to seamlessly move workloads between where you want. So today you might be running on AWS. Tomorrow, for any reason, you might think, okay, Azure is cheaper. You should be able to switch from AWS to Azure, maybe in a day, maybe less than that, and start functioning from there. Right? The same holds good to day after tomorrow. Maybe GCP offers it at a cheaper price or better services. You want to be able to switch from GCP, the Azure to GCP, right? That is the flexibility, the consistency in operations and experience, and a flexibility to move your workload wherever you want is very, very critical. And that's what I would give as the best strategy that any startup or any organization for that matter, any enterprise even for that matter, should have to adopt cloud today. Because for all you know, tomorrow that service provider that you're working with today may not exist for whatever reasons. Their financial structures, maybe their compliances, maybe there are um, unforeseen situations like what happened in the Ukraine-Russia war, right? If you have not followed, there was this announcement, and the next day onwards, all of these public cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and GCPs, and so many of them, just moved out of Russia, and whatever workloads the organizations were running are no more accessible. Your data that you have been storing on that public cloud is no more accessible. What do you do then? Having an ability to have your full control of your workload and your data at all times with you is extremely critical. How can a startup survive if the IP that you have worked with and built with all your team is locked in to a particular vendor, particular cloud service provider, and has not and is no more accessible, no more available for you, what do you do then? It's a scary thought. It is something that is not a very good situation to be in, but is it unavoidable? The answer is yes. We really don't know because of the current geopolitical situations. Anything could happen. How do you safeguard your interest as a startup? It is extremely important to have full control of what you are building. And at any point of time, you should be able to snap the bridge and move for what is available. So there is a lot of focus, especially if you have looked at from a government of India point of view. There is a lot of focus around Make in India, sovereign clouds. There is a lot of focus around using the service providers, the services, the infrastructure, and the capabilities offered by Indian organizations. So a lot of these government clouds that are being built, there are a lot of these services being offered. This is again, I'm just saying these are possible avenues for you to keep your data safe, your workload safe in case something unforeseen happens. I'm not trying to scare you here, but I'm just trying to tell you that be prepared for anything that could potentially risk your own business. I'll pause here if there are any thoughts, any feedback that you want to share.
So, Sukar, having heard you, we really feel that now in with this logic, every company needs a cloud expert within the team. Like, I don't think we at this level can afford a cloud expert just to take a call on what all services we should be availing, what all we should let it go, and what are things that we should keep in control. Because having heard you for last 10 minutes, uh, it's more scary that whatever we are planning, and every day we subscribe to something AWS, SES. One day I went and subscribed for email and all. So now then,
Yeah,
having heard you, I feel like, oh, this is going to be a different game. We should be skeptical, or else we need some experts within the team. I don't know. What do you say?
absolutely. So the idea of me bringing this to your notice is not to scare you, but give you a viewpoint in what is actually happening. Like you rightly mentioned, right? The service is available for you to at a click of a button, and
Correct.
you would naturally tend to explore it, right? As long as you are exploring and you are not locked into that particular service. What I mean by locked into that, right? You are not dependent on that. So if, for example, again, as I mentioned, there are two aspects, right? See, for AWS, 70% of the revenue comes from those three, four services,
For
right?
services.
Now you built, for example, an SCS or SQS as a service that you picked up. I'm just taking that as an example. I'm not
Sure.
saying that is going to happen, but that as a service is something that is very interesting for you, and that is something that you believe will solve a lot of your challenges, and it is very instrumental or very important for your business to go forward, and you consume it, right? And you have built all your workloads, all your workflows based on that,
Outflows.
right?
Correct.
And 6 months down the line, AWS decides this business, there are only 5 subscribers or 100 subscribers, is not worth for me to continue this service and shut it down. You have zero control, by the way. Okay. They can decide at any point of time and say, we are shutting down this service. What do you do then?
We have no control. So what do you suggest in that case? We should not avail these services?
Okay. So the two things that you can do is one, look at the most consumed. So if there are more and more users, naturally that service is going to be evolved, developed, and something that you can continue to leverage, right? Second, look at services that have an alternate viable option. So, for example, if you take an example of SQS of AWS, similar queuing service is available in say Azure or is available in GCP, right? That way, if AWS stops providing that service to you, you are able to switch to uh, Azure or GCP, right? The better alternative is you build your own queuing service, say Kafka based queue or a messaging service that you want to build. Take an EC2 and build your own Kafka install where you take care of that queuing service. It might be a little bit more painful to go through initially, but you have absolute control and you can deploy it anywhere you want at any point of time. So tomorrow, if AWS runs out of India, or if uh, Azure runs out of India, or you don't have a way to run this anywhere else, you can put this anywhere that is available in a say control S or ESDS or a net entity, or somebody is able to offer that for you. You can deploy that and you have full control of it, and your organization will not suffer. Again, this is something that you have to be more worried when the organization becomes a lot larger. At this point of time, all I'm saying is do not get locked into a particular service, especially those beta ones, which are very fancy and the first in the industry. They adopt. They want a lot of people to adopt and come out with a lot of announcements, but eventually, very few really take it up, right? And then they can at some point they will realize, okay, there are no takers. We will shut it down.
Shut it down.
So this is something which, as an organization, you need to be aware of and take those services in the right spirit. Do not get locked in. Have full control with yourself. That's what I can say. Suggest, Abhishek. I hope that helps.
No, that helps because I made a note of it. Like the first point that you suggested is most consumed services what we should look out for, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And the
Very
second
unlikely
one,
that they will shut it down because that is their
correct,
business.
correct.
End of
So
the
I
day,
made a note
AWS,
of
you can't blame AWS as well, right? Because they are in the business of making money, right?
Hmm,
If there are no takers, why would they invest that infrastructure, people, time, right?
correct energy.
Yeah. So they would want to do it on something which a lot of people are using. That way they have better efficiency.
No, quite insightful. And even second point, which is like there should be alternative with the other service provider.
Yep. Yep.
Thanks. I'm done.
Sure. Thank you, Abhishek, for that question. And it is not so scary. Okay. So don't get me wrong. All I'm
Hmm.
trying to give you a perspective is what a lot of enterprises have experienced. And I know of certain startups who are spending a few million every year, few million US dollars every year on a public cloud. And they have they have gone to a stage of this is not going to go forward. And right, every organization, when they spend say X today, it is not going to stay at X next year. There is easily a 15 to 20% hike in the price every year.
No, I
So you
know.
will realize it is not going to be a very sustainable situation. So they are talking to Dell and so many others to see how they can build their strategy to be more optimized.
I know. So I'll just share one of the thing that we shared saw in our previous organization. We had a very similar case. The cost of cloud was with AWS was going more than 2 CR per month, and we were not that. And Sivaling will agree with me. And we started negotiating and trying to bring it down because of when the funding crisis come, we had to work on all the parameters, be it on a cloud level or a team level. We had to reduce the cost.
Yes.
When we went back to them to work on it took about 3 months for them to come back. And then this is not the right person. Then India head will take a call. Then you understand they keep revolving us.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in about 6 months of time, we were able to reduce only by 30-40% of total cost. That too with a lot of pain. So now I can relate the point what would have happened that time.
Absolutely. And in fact, there are there are a lot of these GSIs, the system integrators, global system integrators. A lot of them offer this cloud bill optimization as a service. So if, for example, see, end of the day, for AWS, you are consuming services, you are paying them a charge. And I'll give you one very easy way to compare this. Maybe I'll get there in the interest of time. So this is AWS comparison. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not against AWS. AWS being one of the most commonly used service, I have picked up AWS for conversation purpose, right? The first four bars that you see, lines that you see on the chart, the red, the black, purple, as well as the orange, all of them are AWS. The same workload, right? The same 100 number of virtual machines could be deployed in multiple ways. And look at the cost difference of deployment when you do the same workload in a 3-year upfront reserve versus an on demand. The price difference is roughly 50%, right? 100%, I should say, if you are taking this way, right? The most optimal is $1 million, while you will end up paying $2 million if you have done an on demand. And what do most organizations do today? Because you don't really know how long you're going to run this service and how easy or how sustainable is this, you might most likely be doing an on demand. You will not be reserving, right? Look at the cost difference within AWS itself. So the first thing I would, as Dell, suggest to customers is look at your cloud bill and see how much you can optimize. If you start drilling down each of the workload and start looking at the most, because on the spot instances are another thing that are available, which is extremely cheap, but at a risk, right? In a 2-hour notice, you have to move it out. Now, when it comes to cloud bill optimization, look at your cloud bill, cloud spend, and look at how you can optimize. Like 30% is a really a good situation to be in. If you're able to reduce your bill by 30%, that's a good achievement. A lot of organizations pay people money to get them to the 30% or 40% reduction in their cloud cost. And traditional customers or customers who have been uh, on-premises data centers and they migrated to cloud, they have a lot of they do a lift and shift, right? Their workloads were never built for a public cloud, so they have a much bigger challenge because in an on-premises infrastructure that they were running, nobody really cared. After you bought the systems and installed and brought up the application, even if nobody uses it, the service could have been running for 5 years and it did not cost any money for them. In a public cloud, if you start a service or a virtual machine and do some testing, and at the end of that test of say 2 hours, the test ran, after the 2 hours, that virtual machine is supposed to go down, right? Otherwise, the AWS is going to charge them. These are basic things which probably the IT guys knew, but the end users or the consumers of that service did not know. There are a lot of funny stories where customers realize after 6 months of paying through their nose, realized that workload was never intended to be running beyond a couple of hours. It has been running for over 6 months. And those were some of the premium services that they consume. Because there are people who dedicate resources within their organizations to optimize that deployment and have a periodic check on which resources are being consumed, which are to be turned off, all of those. But then the larger the organization, the more complex it is, and it is really impractical to get into each one of them. But there are a lot of things that can be taken care as a startup today for you. If you are starting to leverage the services, the right services, and use the services for the time that you're consuming it, and after that bring it down, you would see a lot of benefit of the cost saving as well as the heartburn typically that happens when using a public cloud. Right, so I will give a couple of points on what we hear from customers about public cloud. It is something that gives you instant capacity, scale, great points, and you can consume many things like platform and software as a service, etc. It is very, very easy for you to adopt and really not worry about the complexity of technology, right? That's a big barrier for many organizations. For example, if somebody wants to deploy AI, and if I come back and tell you, oh, you need to know what server options are there, what memory options are there, what GPU options are there, which operating system version, and there are 20 other things that you have to take care before you even get started. I mean, that's not something what a startup would want to look at, right? Because you have your focus is on making your IP win and make money with your business, not getting into the nitty gritties of technology complexity. Cloud solves that big time. You really aren't bothered about what is underlying steps or underlying components. That's amazingly easy, and that's really working well for a lot of organizations, including startup. But what is something that can be improved is definitely the cloud sprawl. And I didn't touch upon this, but I mean, this is a common thing that I hear from many startups, especially the initial stage startups, where you get credits from different CSPs, uh, hyperscalers. Say you choose to deploy one workload in Azure, one workload in GCP, one workload in Amazon, one workload somewhere else, because you are getting free credits and you can leverage that. Now, you also have to think about how many copies of data are you maintaining, right? And data is the biggest factor that determines your organization. If you really look at, right, the data that you're building is what determines how successful you are. And if you don't have control of that data, because you are putting it on 4 different places, I'm just giving an example of 4, it could be multiple more. How many copies are there? Who has access to what, right? Today, data privacy, data um, security laws are coming in, right? The cloud sprawl really is a big challenge for a lot of organizations. Today, you may not face this being a startup, but being an early stage startup. But eventually, as you get bigger, you will realize that the the sensitivity of this topic is extremely relevant. Cost we discussed, security posture. Again, it could be from a risk attack point of view. It could also be from the sprawling of data point of view, and control and optimization. These are things which we are hearing as challenges or some things that need to be improved when adopting cloud. So my suggestion and a feedback to startups is work around these challenges that a lot of people have faced. You don't have to really uh, learn by burning your finger, right? You know this is a challenge a lot of organizations have faced. How do I not get into the trap? Think about those and start adopting the strategies which will not lock you in and have 100% control of your workload, your IP, your data with you at all points of time. That's my suggestion, and this is a typical approach I suggest, and as Dell we suggest to customers, is think at data first. Look at that workload that you're having on the public cloud or on premises or on wherever it is. Look at it and evaluate what is the best way to move forward on that application. What is the best operating model for it? Does this have to be a application that I develop and own? If that is so, where should I do it? If it is something that I can purchase as a SaaS model, what are the risks? Will I be locked in to that particular service provider, right? Will I be able to come out of it if that service provider goes bankrupt, right? Or something wrong happens to that organization, because you don't really control everything, right? So think of all those risk factors when you look at the strategies, especially strategies when you're talking about are some things that are going to help you over a period of 3 to 5 years. You need to reevaluate every few months, every 6 months maybe. But having a long-term strategy goal in place and aligning your everyday activities to those long-term goals is very, very critical. With that, I will pause for any questions. I know we are close to the time that we allotted, but happy to take any questions and if there are any feedback that we want to probably exchange, and maybe some of the learnings that you had and you want to share it with the peers on this particular session, I'm happy to be part of that as well.
Mr. Umar, I'm good. It has been an interactive session, and I think I learned more than what I was expecting because this being a little more technical for me, but still I learned more than what I was expecting. Uh, I hope it is fine if we connect with you in person, either on LinkedIn or some other channel, or
Of course.
if we have an email ID, in case we need some support or some guidance from you in future.
Absolutely, anytime, Abhishek, and I'm glad that this discussion was helpful. My objective was to share my experience. This was not a sales pitch. I did not intend to bring about anything that Dell
No,
is
no,
offering, right?
not at all.
This was
You didn't even
this
bring
was
it.
purely about sharing my experience, and if there is any way that this conversation is going to help your organization do better and avoid the pitfalls, I'm really I would feel myself very happy that this conversation has helped you. So
It is indeed. Thank you.
my pleasure, Abhishek. Any feedback on the learnings and some things that you want to share with your peers? Can possibly have that as well.
I would like to echo the same thoughts what Abhishek had mentioned just now. Apart from that, the service slices which you had displayed in one of the slides, perhaps 2, 3 slides before the end slide, are the service slices something which are plug and play type, as in those are available from any of the cloud service providers, or it's unique to AWS only?
The names are unique, but the similar service is available in most of them.
Right. So
again,
question was in case if at one point of time we decide that we pull out certain services, moving to the cost consciousness, and then reinsert from a competitor cloud service provider. So if that is feasible, something which is workable.
Technically feasible, but keep in mind, if for example, take example of your data sitting in S3,
Yep.
right? And S3 is Amazon's bucket, right? And you want to run your workload on GCP because GCP is offering it cheaper. But think of this, that data has to move from S3 to GCP. Every time data moves, you are paying to AWS, right? So the complexity is something that you need to keep in mind when you adopt a multiple cloud strategy. Yes, you need to have that redundancy and an ability to plug and play, but try and keep workloads contained within a particular hyperscaler. Right. So if you have 3 applications, run an application A on one hyperscaler completely. Don't pick a component of it to run somewhere else. Again, this is more from a data flow, latency, cost factors, and security, because there is a cloud adoption framework everybody offers. So AWS cloud adoption framework will tell you everything about AWS, right? The same will not work for GCP. GCP has their own cloud adoption framework. So having data that is contained within the workload, completely contained within one particular hyperscaler, will really reduce the cost. Again, there are corner cases, there are exceptions, but I'm just telling you from a best practice point of view.
That answers my question. And I will definitely get in touch with you when we are in the mode of pre-sales activities pre-solutioning activities wherein we can come out with the best approach before we pitch it in front of customers. Perhaps we can connect offline. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Any other
Right,
questions?
Any questions? Any other things that you want to have a discussion on?
So there is one thing. See, what I was feeling, definitely you throw light upon so many nuances which cloud brings it with itself. Though there are so many lucrative things to go for, it adapts scalability, cost effectiveness, especially when working remote, and so many things. But the nuances part is which are the things which generally the startups or the founders do not really consider into when they are going into, right? I mean, just because it has so many advantages, the disadvantage gets sidelined.
Correct.
But just in a nutshell, in a maybe a quick minute, can you just sum up? Is there a threshold you would say at this moment of time during the scaling is when the startup or a founder should see the yellow flag or kind of red flag? Uh, because like you said, see, going into cloud is very easy. Coming out is way difficult, and it can be punitive also. Right?
Absolutely. So my take on this, Shivling, is there is really no one answer for this, right? The size, the complexity is what matters. Now, is cloud all that bad? The answer is no, right? For many organizations, possibly even a very large deployment on a public cloud is still the way to move forward, right? I would not discount that and say cloud is bad, do not go to cloud, right? So you could still be 100% on cloud for the entire lifetime of your organization. Again, the only two things that I would suggest or recommend is the complete control of your IP and your data should be with you.
Okay.
That is all. It does not matter the size, the complexity. At any point, you should be able to come out of it. You should have that control with you. That is all I would recommend. It is not easy. It is easier said than done. But try having that level of engagement with the public cloud provider.
So you'd say that it's more of a girlfriend kind of thing. Attaching is easy. Detaching is very difficult.
It is not as easy. That's very well said. Yeah. So, but yeah, in terms of the engagement, the relationship in a public cloud, you should be able to move seamlessly with what is available, and the control factors for you are very limited there. That's the simple reason, right? If you are controlling everything there, then you can choose what you want to do. But you look at the shared responsibility model of any public cloud provider, you will realize really you don't have any control.
Absolutely.
Right? You might think on the face of it, it might look like you are getting a favor done by somebody, but actually, if you really look at, you are not really getting anything.
Right. Great. So, yeah, got it.
That's the gist of it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Looks like well with that we have reached to the end of this session. I can't thank Sugumar enough, just because just on the one call he took out time from his busy schedule and he had to share
my
his
pleasure,
experiences.
and it's been really a wonderful experience having a conversation with the team here. So I'm really thankful for them to make it interactive and having those relevant questions. And I'm glad this was helpful in some way or the other. And looking forward to this engagement. If there are anything that I can do, feel free to reach out, and we will be in touch.
Sure.
Thank you so much for organizing
so kind
this.
of you, Sugumar. Yeah, thank you. Our pleasure. And definitely, I'll be sharing your email ID for the startups here, just in case they require any of your help and all.
Absolutely.
But thanks to Del, thanks to Sugumar, thanks to Vishal and everybody for setting this up.
Have a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Sugumar.